Hello. How often do you think about the Roman Empire? I don't actually care too much about the answer to that one. What I want to know is, why are you thinking about the Roman Empire? One answer, and it's a pretty good answer, is that it's very easy to think about the Roman Empire. We know a lot about the Romans. They not only left us many artifacts and ruins and visual representations of their lives, but they wrote a lot of things down. We've never really lost the understanding of their written language. We don't just know what weapons they used, we have descriptions of their battle tactics. We don't just have the footprints of their houses, we know a lot about what life was like in them. We have many detailed images of their clothes, written recipes for their food, widely translated plays, political thoughts, scandal rags, graffiti. A lot of people who are not historians want snacky concrete facts about history they can remember and regurgitate at parties, and there's a whole lot of the Roman Empire to roll around in if that's what you want. But the same is true of a lot of the classical world, by which I mean the cultures centered around the Mediterranean, who are not all that similar, but have in common good conditions for preserving archaeological evidence and a tendency to write a lot of things down. My Norse history people are quietly weeping. So, why the Romans? Why not, to use two completely random examples, ancient Greece or ancient Egypt? A lot of the key philosophy, maths, political thought in Rome built heavily on that of Greece. And the Egyptian dynasties are much older and longer lasting, and, for most of it, more powerful and influential than Rome. But the ancient Egyptians were brown and the ancient Greeks were gay. The Roman Empire is white and heterosexual. For the record, none of those statements are even true. This is not something I'm qualified to speak on. The ethnicity of ancient Egyptians is surprisingly complex and nuanced topic, but we can confidently say that the overwhelming majority of them weren't white. The Roman Empire was huge, covered parts of North Africa and Asia, and therefore, obviously, super ethnically diverse. We have a lot of evidence saying that people of many different ethnicities were in all parts of the Roman Empire. And both ancient Rome and ancient Greece seem to have had very strict ideas about what was and wasn't appropriate sexual behaviour, and that did include some specific homosexual behaviours that were socially okay. And there's also evidence that some people were also doing the not socially okay forms of homosexuality, because of course they were. That literally always happens everywhere. Gay people exist and have always existed, and society deciding that actually that's okay as long as you're rich and a top does not mean that everyone in that society was just accepting that blindly and never had any other kind of sexy feelings. Now, some people know this, the gay stuff. So historically, by which I mean the last couple of centuries in Europe, being super into ancient Greece was a very obvious, like, wink wink, I'm pro men loving men. And sometimes being into ancient Rome was a more subtle, like, this was also a thing in ancient Rome. I'm open to exploring some bisexuality. But usually, almost always, it wasn't that. Usually it just meant you were a fascist, which is the crux of the problem, right? You know who loves the Roman Empire? Passionately, deeply enamored of the Roman Empire? The founding fathers of the USA. Napoleon. All of upper-class 19th century Britain. Early 20th century Italy. Early 20th century Germany. A whole bunch of leaders I can't really name on TikTok, because it'll get censored on TikTok, where we're all talking about how often do you think about the Roman Empire. This does not describe all fascists around the world. Imperial Japan has their own bullshit going on. Speaking as someone with a Japanese studies degree, if you're a white guy who's just really, really into samurai and Bushido, also super sus for similar but slightly different reasons. I do not know anything about China or Russia. So this is another massive oversimplification. It's a very complex topic. But why do American presidents serve 2 terms max? Because that's what George Washington did. Why did Washington only serve 2 terms? Because that's what Cincinnatus did. Cincinnatus was a dictator. The original use of the word dictator. It was a position you could have in ancient Rome where you got absolute power for a finite period of time to deal with a specific problem, and then you could never hold any position of power ever again, unless they called you back later to have one more go go at being a dictator. 2 goes max, not consecutive. And Cincinnatus did exactly that. He served as a dictator once, sorted the problem, went off, became a farmer. Some years later they needed him back to solve another problem, so he did, and then happily handed power back and went back to his farm and lived out the rest of his life. His farm full of slaves, that's also a thing the Romans did. The Romans also traditionally freed their slaves when they died. Weird how that became a thing in the early USA as well. So what's the problem with Cincinnatus? That story I just told you? Probably not true. It's a legend. It was a legend to the later Romans, and it continued as a legend, and it was held up by the founding fathers as the ideal of leadership. What do you think Cincinnati's named after? There isn't actually a lot of evidence that Cincinnatus did all those things. There's actually some evidence he both abused his position and tried really hard to hold other office in the middle bit, and also maybe died really soon after the second dictatorship. Not to mention, he's not the only dictator, and some of them, Julius Caesar, were not good at giving power back. Boris Johnson also loves Cincinnatus. Funny that. When we talk about historical empire builders, they, 1, very frequently fetishize and idolize a nostalgic ideal of what the Roman Empire was like, including taking on some of the trappings and iconography of the Roman Empire and trying to follow the example of largely fictionalized accounts of great leaders. And 2, are almost always doing some intensely dodgy stuff, ranging from slavery, xenophobia, homophobia, sexism, all the way to genocide. As someone in the historical costuming community, who is also queer and neurodivergent, but white, so I get an accidental clear pass into some very dodgy online spaces, I really try and get across to people the fact that romanticizing the past is inherently very risky because it immediately puts you in the company of people who are doing that for the wrong reasons. And those people are not always going to give you a clear heads up that that's what they're doing. The dog whistles are sometimes super quiet. So I've lost count of the number of people I've encountered on social media where I have to be like, I'm giving you max 10 posts to prove to me that you just like wearing historical clothes and you're not a right-wing trad wife. And if I'm not satisfied in those 10 posts, I'm just going to leave you the heck alone because I can't risk this. Generally speaking, on the left of the political spectrum, I think we are very quick to stop enjoying someone's content if we determine that they have dodgy political beliefs or just political beliefs that don't align with our own, because we feel like consuming that content is an endorsement of those beliefs which we accurately perceive as causing harm. The same thing, to judge by my comments section and the fan bases of other creators, does not seem to happen to the same extent on the political right. They don't care that you have lefty liberal beliefs as long as they can plausibly ignore them and concentrate on the other things that you do, because they do not perceive many of our beliefs as actively hurtful so much as hostile, wrong, and annoying. Giving money to trans people does seem to be a thing they don't ignore and get very upset about. Support me on Ko-fi. If you are in historical costuming, or even just history fan spaces, history talk, if you will, and you are an ally to the LGBTQIA+ community, to people of colour, to people with disabilities, you need to say so clearly all the time, or the fascists think you are one of them. Because you cannot tell the difference between someone who thinks about the Roman Empire daily because they care about the nuances of the history and they love how much evidence we have about normal people's lives, and someone who thinks about the Roman Empire daily because they genuinely think the Romans had it right. They were the pinnacle of civilization. That's the best way of running a nation, and we should try and emulate them. In short, please, I'm begging you, contextualize your shit. Also, as a queer trans masc in a relationship with a man, I'd super like it if we stopped letting toxic men romanticize cultures where it's okay to have sex with other men, as long as you're not a bottom. My name is Ash. I've just come back off holiday, and I'm very tired. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep the YouTube gods happy. Yes, I will hide your comments without reading them if you're rude, but hey, do it anyway. It genuinely helps my content reach more people. Support me on Ko-fi if you'd like to get early access to see more of this sort of thing, but honestly, you're not getting more like this. You're gonna get mostly LARP and costuming content and Halloween brain rot. Follow me on other platforms if you'd like to see pictures of my cat. He's back off holiday too, so that shall soon resume. And finally, dream big, utopia big, not empire big, and I'll see you very soon.